Okay, so I kind of fucked up a little bit with the Ben 10 versus Green Lantern video. Thankfully, I'm happy to say that not only has the reception been mostly positive so far, but a lot of the comments have been very insightful, very civil, and they're pointing out criticisms very justifiably. So to those people, thanks. Your feedback means a lot to me, seriously. There was some salt shed in the comments, but that just comes with the territory of dissecting this episode in the first place. But let me just address some common criticisms that I've gotten. So first of all, apparently the Omnitrix Pulse does not have a cooldown. I only brought that up because Liam did, and while I did say he should have brought an example of, or like proof that it has a cooldown, I just kind of blindly went along with Liam, and that's definitely the L I'm gonna take. And that's technically me going into versus debater mode, despite explicitly saying that I would not do that. And the next thing is that, okay, this is absolutely gonna get taken out of context by those types of people, but whatever. I did come across as biased in the ending. Like, I'm not gonna try to pretend that I'm this unbiased person, or like whatever. I definitely have my bias, and they clearly show by the ending, like with the whole, why does the conclusion matter to you so much? Because, like, it's a versus show. The conclusion has to matter, just like the animation. The conclusion at least needs to make sense. I mean, there are people who said that the conclusion needs to be correct. That's where the subjective thing comes into play, but yeah, I mean, just in case people watch that video without seeing my other without seeing my Death Battle ranking retrospective, I have criticized several of their conclusions, actually. Like, I even criticized something like Vader versus Doom and Tracer versus Scout, both of which are actually pretty similar to Ben 10 versus Green Lantern's conclusion when you think about it. Like, well, I mean, even if the verdict technically makes sense, like, it's explained like shit. And especially with Tracer versus Scout's case, they focus so hard on like debunking this one feat that is not only very easy to disprove just by looking at the clip they show on screen, albeit it's much easier than with the Alien X thing, but either way, it outright contradicts something that they said earlier, like within that same video in that analysis. Eventually, I did get to how wishy-washy people got with conclusions, like how this conclusion is criticized for being explained very poorly, but this one isn't, despite being just as bad, if not worse, in plenty of other ways. That should have been the focus. That should have been the focus of the ending. Or, at the very least, I could have been more direct about who I was asking this question to. Like, the people, like, like referring to people who say, yeah, analyses were pretty good, animation was good, but the conclusion is shit, so the entire episode is shitty, and so is Death Battle as a whole. Those were the people I was trying to ask, but it didn't really come across that way. Or maybe I could have worded it some other way, in a way that says, just off the top of my head, which do you think is more important, the verdict or the conclusion? Because I could have also stated a difference. The conclusion is like their explanation on the verdict, and the verdict is just who they think wins. Something like that. I really should have asked, how important is the conclusion? Or something like that, because it's not as snarky, not as stupid. It doesn't sound as stupid because you're asking people, okay, this is a versus show where they put effort into everything, like the fight, the rundowns, etc., etc. With all that in mind, how important do you think the conclusion is? And of course, you still have people saying that the conclusion is the most important part of the episode. All right, fair enough. Fair enough. You're in the right to think that way. Because, yeah, it is a versus show. Although there are plenty of other places, like not just the G1 prediction blogs, but even other versus shows on YouTube that don't even have animations. Just backgrounds, verdict, bada bing, bada boom. But Death Battle's still a versus show. Oh my gosh, I'm repeating myself a lot. And I should have done, like, any of those things instead of just going into this whole monologue that I did about, like, why I don't think the conclusion matters that much, even though I also criticize other episodes for having poor conclusions, so that's actually pretty hypocritical of me to say. Like, I mean, and for the record, I think it's perfectly fair to criticize the conclusion or even the episode for the conclusion. If anything, you should do that. If Death Battle keeps slacking off on their conclusions, then at some point they're going to delve into very season 1 and 2-esque conclusions. And now that I think about it, it's actually kind of similar to what Season 7 did for a handful of its conclusions. Like with Winter Soldier versus Red Hood, where they just didn't even think about giving any of the characters stats, but they gave Jason feats, and the most they gave Bucky was a weird scaling feat. So yeah, I just wanted to address those things real quick, as well as a couple of other things in the comments. I brought this up almost immediately, and just in case to people who couldn't see that, I was kind of acting all wishy-washy with when it's fair to use outside factors and when it wasn't. I mean, yes, I said that this is the one exception, and it's because, like, I only use the outside factors because of how I would have improved the conclusion. Like, instead of, and even the Q&A to an extent, like, instead of using another lantern where there's a vague implication that Hal could time travel, they could just show scans of Hal Jordan actually time traveling. And there is some other context with the stuff they brought in, but I'm not as knowledgeable on versus debating, and I shouldn't try to act like I am. I think that going forward with the ranking retrospective, I should just point out my qualms with what's brought in the episode and nothing else. Like, you see, this is why I don't like doing outside factors, because when you do that, then you get all sorts of other people saying, no, there's this, there's that, you're interpreting this incorrectly or something. Whereas, like, if you just stick with the episodes, then only the comments will bring up the outside factors, but they don't try to accuse you of doing any shit like that. Like, just so we're clear, I have nothing against debunks. Even the ones I don't like, such as pretty much everything Seth the Programmer has made. The only time where using outside factors is unfair is if you're criticizing the entire episode. But with debunks, at least from what I've seen, they usually just criticize the research side of things, or like they stick with the conclusion, or the feats they used. Like, they're more specific on what they're criticizing. Unless they say something like, oh, but the animation had this thing going on. But I'm pretty sure debunks would naturally bring up the Q&A, at least mention it. So there's that. I'm not going to take down the video and re-upload it or anything, nor am I going to put it under private, because I think that when I actually talked about just the episode, I don't think I really said anything wrong. Like I said, the reception has been mostly positive, and all of the criticisms have been really civil. That says to me that I didn't piss people off that much. I think it's safe to say that there's a reason why I never do any response videos, like when I responded to Kuro's videos on the Death Battle Q&A, which apparently is actually pronounced Kuro, like Kuro. That's just the inner weeb in me pronouncing it Kuro. The most I'm gonna do is just, like, turn off notifications for, like, comments I get on my videos, just to give myself a clear head, and so I can focus on other things, like finishing up the Season 6 ranking retrospective. Like, just actually giving a fuck about my mental health for once. Not that I never try to take care of myself, but especially when I'm, like, knees deep into a video, sometimes I just focus on that and nothing else, and that's a problem I have. I don't want to be a slave to the work, you know? That's why I keep this as a side hustle. But still, thanks to everyone who pointed out these criticisms to me. I don't think it's a bad video. It doesn't have that many issues. It's just that the issues are just that big, and that's the reception I've been getting so far. Or maybe it's just that they seem more prominent because the video literally got over 10,000 views in the span of a day, which is insane. Thanks for the support, guys. But anyways, that's all I got from me. Just this little unscripted follow-up. Just trying to clear a few mistakes I made, and see you with the Season 6 ranking retrospective. I'll see you when I feel like it. Deuces.